today's subject is one that I really enjoy. I use this word kind of sparingly. The concept of play, I use it sparingly. And when we think about, and yet, it's absolutely critical to almost everything I do. So I think that it bears thinking about, studying, being open to the particularities of what play accomplishes. Within improvisational practices, there's no success without play. I've just been listening. I could not find my text, Free Play, by this wonderful writer, musician. Hang on, Klaus is joining us. And I'm responsible for all of this these days. So today, so it's going to be a little bit bouncy as I get started. The thing that is significant to me about play is, I was speaking about Free Play, the text Free Play, written by, and I kind of know his name. I struggle with his name. Let me get it for you. It's right here. I want to say Nachmanovich. I was right. Yeah, Stefan Nachmanovich. And it's a valuable text to listen to. He's really dealing with play as in a sense, as a critical opposition to spirituality, or to the soul. That of us which plays. If we don't play in our work, we become stiff and rule following. And if we lose sight of our soul as we work, play, or whatever it is, improvise, then we lose sight of our ground. So these two things, soul and play, within his notions, are essential to improvisation, dance improvisation, or any improvisation. He's a musician. I'm looking for right now in a text that I just, an interview, and the text that I just wrote, I cleaned up. And look at how I'm using the term play. The improvisation that interests me is a relational practice arising through the physicality of attention as actions of the body, as a mind engaging with, or as other body minds, human and other than human, sentient and beyond, including the spaces and places of being. Improvisation is a co-creative practice of bringing the world of relations to life through actions of recognition and play. So what I'm really working at there and looking at, and that I'd like to bring to this, is, first of all, starting on a ground in which play, everything is relational. There's nothing we can do that is not relational. We'll just start there. Breathe, and you're in relations. Take a deep breath, experience that. Now, breath we think of as automatic, and then we can study our breath. We can work with our breath. But what happens when you if I say play breathing, play with breathing right now with that relationship, what are you going to do? How does it change what you do rather than focusing and working your breath? Hello, Kevin. So let's take a moment, just one moment. Play breathing, play with your breath, play with the relationship. And everyone's going to tell me what you notice when you do. What do you notice?
I move my attention throughout my body.
Right, right. Anybody else?
I go to another practice that I do that is also improvisational play. It's like vocal improvisation. And there it's more intense that you're playing with the breath, right? If I'm making a pattern, I have to find places to breathe. So
yeah,
there's a rhythmic element and like rhythmicality.
You're playing with time and relations of time.
Right.
Relations in time. Yeah. Gorgeous. Absolutely. Rhythm is always time.
Mm-hmm.
It may be spatial rhythm, but it's bringing the time that is present in space. That's a concept we could go to as well. But it also brings your nose to you. It brings your interiority to you. It brings all of these relations. Might bring the quality of the air to you. It brings the dance. Play brings you to you in the sense that there's no escaping you, just as there's no escaping relations and your kind of entanglement in the world. That entanglement, those relations are not regimented. They're not prescribed unless you prescribe them. They're up for play, in other words. So critical to the work that I've been doing all these years is the fact that any moment is the potential for play. In his book, Stefan Nachmanovich says that talking is improvisation, as it is. I love talking because I love the rhythms. I love the change of emphasis. I love the musicality. I love that it's not just musicality for musicality's sake. It's musicality that rides the waves of a thought or image or idea. It's musicality that shapes the feeling of a moment. It'd be very different if I said shapes the feeling of a moment. Shapes the feeling of a moment. Shapes of a moment. And all of that is improvised. All of that is play. Because a moment is a toy. Once wrote a paper called "A Moment Can Be a Toy." And I wrote this before I went to get my PhD. And when I regurgitated it or brought it back up to life during my PhD, my lead professor was, really did not care for the notion of a toy, that it was to make light of a subject, which is exactly and precisely what I intend to do. I care about lightness of being because the alternative does what Nachmanovich said: without play, we become staid, we become stuck, we become stiff, we become predictable. With play, we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. It's a toy. What is at play in a moment? We just did it with our breath. Relations are at play. The quality of those relations, the care, the taste, what you bring to taste it. So even this moment is playful. So let's do an agreement right now. Okay? I would like you to play with how you participate in this Zoom session. In other words, be predictable. Just for yourself, constantly be offering yourself a moment that is a toy. The moment that can be, listen with the right side of your face. Your left ear instead of your right. Change some orientation of relations, maybe to me, or maybe you're going to be just sitting there listening, but the play you're doing is play that is thinking of some idea as well as what's being said. You're letting the words tip you off into other thought forms and coming back and going away again and coming back. Perhaps that's how you play. Maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not. It doesn't matter. What you do is yours. Play means it's yours. Nobody else can play the way you play. Right? Nobody else can. You're making it your own the moment you step into playfulness. And that is critical to any creative practice. Correct? Playfulness, allowing yourself to own the moments, not forcing creativity because it's called creativity, but rather allowing creative acts to appear because you taste them, because you hear them, feel them, smell them, because you own the moment. How do you learn? You learn at play. The best learning is when you are at play. So when my lead professor really didn't like the word play, didn't like the word toy, better with play than with toy. To me, there's no difference. A toy is something that you treasure in the moment. It does something that's really fun. So as a dancer, a moment of movement is a toy. This is what I'm playing with right now. And anything that I can experience, understand, it may be a thought, it may be an idea, it may be an object, it may be part of my own body, it may be the air itself, something that is of the world, of material or non-material. All of that is up for play as far as I'm concerned when I dance. What is critical to play is that you are in the moment. You're not in the next moment. If you're in the next moment, you're not playing. What are you doing? You're trying to force something to happen. You are in that moment using, I want to say, the eternity of the instant now. You have limited and crushed everything so that the next moment will appear as you choose it. Because play exists in that realm of interesting thought of the unknowable. In the moment of play, you are knowing your relations, but they emerge something that is wide open. So you are in recognition of that exquisiteness of existence. It's not forecast. We don't know what happens in the next moment. And if you're playing right now, you don't know what's happening in the next moment. It's so much fun to think that you are all owning this moment as I am as well. Serious work. But it is. It's critical. Okay. How's it going with playing right now as you listen, as you're doing that? How's that going? It's working? It's a little weird? You already were at play. So let's talk about attention, because I think it was Amanda who said it was attention, or was that you, Berta? I can't remember who said it. It was you. Okay, Berta. That the first thing that happened when she started to play with her breath was she had to bring her attention to her breathing. So the wand of play is attention. And you want to hold the wand. You don't want to give that wand away. We're in a time in which everybody's asking you for your wand. Give me your wand. Give me that little box that we carry, this one, right? It wants my wand. Now, how I step into relations with anything, especially that, is important with respect to me understanding that attention of itself is a high value, high value. It's not cheap. It's not throwaway. It is how we come to know the world and how we get to engage in our relations. So being attentional, having attention training is important, but attention itself takes play. In the work I'm doing, attention is the wand that is the critical element that takes training, because it is what we will use to understand the human differently. The human that simply repeats their relations is a human that's not at play, that's not getting to know the world anew, that is not rethinking what a human being can be. So that openness of attention, that readiness to be in relations that are co-creative, and for me is critical. The toy that you're playing with is also creating, right? Without a toy, where's the play? There's got to be a toy. The wand finds you your toy. But the wand also, the wand, which is you, it finds you your toy, but it reveals who you are. It reveals you. And that's what's so difficult for people about play, is that you show up. Play. How dangerous is that? That's incredibly dangerous. People will know who you are. And if people know who you are, that's really important. And that's really scary. Because then that unleashes all the shit. Come down. Yeah? What is that shit? That shit is value judgments, opposition, distaste, all the disses. Add a dis to any word. You got it. You can fail if you show up in play. If the play itself fails by somebody else's reckoning, not by yours, but by somebody else's, you're vulnerable. There is no play without vulnerability. And that's that cycle that I wanted to bring to you, which is the vulnerability that you're going to show up. You show up vulnerable to being dissed. You don't show up, you can't play. It's a conundrum. So you have to, at some point, make that decision. Am I at play? Or maybe it shows up as, am I available? Am I knowable? Can I be vulnerable? Can I show up? And if you can, then you unleash this immense world of practice that you all want. Right? I mean, who doesn't want to be creative in a moment? Who doesn't want a lot of toys? I want a lot of toys. So, great. I've been going on for half an hour. Open this up and let everybody else talk. Oh, I know what it is. I love this thing by E.E. Cummings. Let me see if I can find it, because it's such a good thing. While you guys talk, I'm going to look for this thing that I want to read to you, because I'm set off by it, by where we went in talking about this work. This work. Love it. I love it. Great. Go ahead. Anybody? Does somebody have something a question, an idea, something to pounce on? Like a cat. Get that.
I could start.
Go, Beata.
Because you were now talking about the toy, I was trying to translate to German, and because for me a toy is like a thing I can hold, like it's an object. And but from listening to you, it sounds like you're using the word toy wider, like also the toy of like be it my attention or my awareness, like inner states or something. And yeah, so it's like translating. When we talk about God, we can translate it into more various things. So that's what I'm just busy thinking about.
It is true. This is absolutely true. That you're the namer of the toy. You're the one that figures it out, that finds it, that reveals it, that opens it. And that's called creative practice. If you think about it as a toy, it frees you. It allows the child within to be also present, the one that is in complete amazement at the world, that never tires, that never says, well, I've seen this before. You know, when a child starts to say that and starts to behave that way, they think they're growing up. They're dying to the child they are. You want that to live forever. So delicious, right? Okay, let me find this. What do I call it? Let me look in my computer. Anybody else have something to say? I have a hard time doing two things at once because I want to hear you.
I could share something.
Yeah, go for it.
I really enjoyed the prompt of playing with how we are on this call, and the example you had of allowing your words to take us somewhere else. And normally I would consider this a distraction, like my attention is being stolen away from you by some other aspect of me, and I might like judge or shame my attention for doing that. And if I can allow that to be the play of it, where I give my attention to that part of myself, or allow it to take an adventure there, right? When I do it intentionally, how different that can feel.
Totally different, right? When you have permission.
Yeah.
Permission to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Permission to guide and trust your own attention. So that's where attention training comes in, Angela. Attention training comes in when you take control of your attention and you give yourself permissions. Permission to not do it the way the teacher told you to do it. permission to not show up the way it's expected or anticipated. Permission, here's the biggest permission, the biggest toy is permission to be brilliant. That permission only happens in the presence of play. The person who can be brilliant is the person who is able to be at play in the world, in the presence of others. That's a big permission. And nobody gives it to you but you. I can call you brilliant. And when I do, guess what happens? Your permission to play jumps to a far higher level. You suddenly have a lot of permission. Kevin's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. Did you know? And his permission just jumped. So if you want people to play, you have to be looking at their brilliance and point it out and support it. Not think your job is to be more brilliant than they are. Just not the deal. Not the deal at all. Okay, I didn't succeed that way. I'm doing it another way, guys. Okay, I am finding why am I not able to do this? Because I'm thinking and trying to be with you, but there is a book, a series of lectures by E.E. Cummings, in which it's called The Performer as Artist. That's what it is. In which he gave these series of lectures at Harvard University. It wasn't, this is The Performer as Artist is the paper that, or the talk I did based on that. I'm having a hard time finding old material of mine, material that I've done, that I've worked with years and years and years ago. And it's no longer in my, computer. And I don't know where these papers have gone. So like a moment could be a toy. It is in my computer and I don't know where it's no longer in my computer. So I have to hopefully find a hard copy. I went looking for it on old saved external hard drives, but they all have different programs now. They're all too old to show up on my modern computer. So anyway, in these series of lectures, E.E. Cummings says, go ahead and do what every other Tom, Dick, and Harry does. But if you don't want to do that, basically, you have to step out on a limb. And it's in that stepping out on a limb that you find yourself, that you get to know who you are by the ways you are different, by the ways you play. Nobody plays the same way. Thank God. And it is that level of play that it really, if you're with somebody that plays well, oh my God, is that fun, right? I love smart people. I mean, I just love smart people. And I love smart people because they're at play on an intellectual level or on some level. So, of course, smart people aren't the same. Smart people may be highly creative people. What makes them smart to me is that they're at play in whatever realm they're working in. Hey there, Gretchen Dunn. I love you. So, anybody else have something you want to say or question? This is open time.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about children never feel tired. I'm wondering, like, how, like, even when you are tired, like, what does play mean when you are tired? And it's not like, sometimes we say rest, but we say rest as a way of, like, escaping the world is truly, but I'm thinking of how I'm remembering a writer says rest as an embodied way of getting lost.
Say that again, please.
Rest as a means of getting lost and go deeper.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm so associating that with a sense of playness instead of escaping from the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that notion, Jara. Exactly. It can be, and if it's understood that way, it does a very different thing than if it's understood as escaping. And you just stepped right into a highly creative event or moment. Like one of the most, and you just did something that I want to point out to everyone with that play. When you are at play with the world, you get to choose the way you name things. What happens when you name a cow a kind of bird? You know, what happens when you name sleep? Of going deeper, a way of entering into this new possibilities, being in a new kind of play. What changes in how you meet the world? Everything changes. Everything changes. So when you face a difficulty, for instance, the naming of something as difficult is a point of play. Language is always at play. So when it's difficult, you know you've just told yourself how to meet it, to play with it. Play with this as if it is difficult. As opposed to play with this as if it is a challenge. Find the challenge in this. Find the difficulty in this. Very different. Find the, I have something that I very often start contact improv classes with, which is I put people into a group and have everybody walk in their own pathways, as close to each other as they can without touching. And then I limit the space and limit the space and limit the space until there's barely enough room to move. And what I'm attempting to do is to get people to be absolutely in the present moment, because if they're thinking about where they're going to move in the next moment, that space is already gone because somebody else has filled it. And then I ask them to notice the difference between attending to where the people are and everybody's pathway and attending to where all the opening spaces are. Right? Notice the space, notice the space. There's always space opening up. There's always somewhere for them to go. But if they're noticing where the people are, there's nowhere to go. There's too many people. What you choose to attend to is at play. With words, with ideas, with concepts, with dance movements, with the way to do a dance movement, with everything. Now, does that mean there aren't the rules of physics? Does that mean bodies don't have constraints? Of course they do. Play without constraints isn't any fun. The constraints are what you're playing with, what you're moving. And whether you see them as a problem or as a toy has a lot to do with what you end up with. Breathing itself is a constraint, right? It's a shape, it's a form, it's an organization. We play with it, just to make it really clear what I meant. Okay. Anything else here from anybody? The play, when as improvisers, all play is improvisation, right? If you're a musician, you're playing. Steve once said a wonderful thing about Margot Fonteyn. And I just read something about Martha Graham said about Margot Fonteyn, and I wish I remembered the source. But Steve said, Margot Fonteyn was saying that, Martha Graham was saying of Margot Fonteyn that she broke all the rules. She just broke the rules. Which means that she was, of course, at play. You can't break the rules without being at play, because you don't know what happens next. You can't predict, you can't preform. So, and Steve said, Fontaine was a superlative improviser within these really tight constraints of ballet. She was Margot Fonteyn. I guess you probably don't know who she was. She was an exquisite prima ballerina. I think she was New York City Ballet. But she was, she was, I think she danced into her 50s. Rudolf Nureyev danced with Margot Fonteyn, and Margot Fonteyn was so much older than he was. She was able to taste every single instant as it passed. That's at play. That's improvisation, being able to make those micro choices within very tight constraints. Is to understand that the scale of play is yours. And to understand scale itself is part of the play. What scale do you want to be experiencing this on? Okay.
Say a little more about scale as a toy.
Scale. Well, we're used to living on the human scale, speaking on the human scale. And the human scale experiences time, if we're going to talk about time as opposed to talking about space. We know that these are one and the same thing, right? Time and space are one thing, but we talk about them very differently in the sense that we talk about mind and body very differently. But when we think of them as one thing, then we get a different, we get different possibilities, which is a big part of my work. But if I'm looking at time, at scale rather, on the level of its time, its temporal impact. The scale of human talking is the scale at which we can describe things that we have given language to. So perhaps it's the scale at which it takes you time to go. You think, I want to make a cup of coffee, or I want to reheat my tea. And you're now in the time sense that it takes to reheat tea, to walk into the kitchen, to put water in the pot, to turn the thing on, to do, that's a certain time scale that you're thinking, perhaps experiencing in. But if you had to get to the hospital and take that hot water to somebody in the hospital, I'm in an urgent situation, whatever it is, and the hot water was really important to you, each one of those experiences would be broken down into micro moments. And it would take so incredibly long to heat the water, or to fill the pot, or to get into the kitchen. You couldn't get in there fast enough. And you'd be noticing all the details of things that got in your way. That's another scale. Dancing, not on the scale of a tendu. Do you know what a tendu is? A foot brush of the not on the scale of a tendu, but on the scale of the micro moments that feel the quality of the floor, the tiny little crevices in the wood that give you micro delays in that brush, or the sensitivity that you have to each event. And it may be an event of feeling, the feeling that it is of going outward, 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 outward with that foot into space, the impossibility of the next step. That tasting, I put in the level of taste to describe affective qualities. Those details of taste, or those details of affect, are unnameable. Because they're unnameable, they're on a completely different scale. And when we dance on that completely different scale, our play takes a different, we're working on a different, in a different realm of play. But play we are. So the statement was that Margot Fonteyn was was essentially, the statement was she was improvising, or she was at play. And other dancers weren't. They were working on the human scale. That's what separated and created her brilliance. She taught everybody something. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So I'm always working with at play with time, the scale of time. It's why I call working at that scale that Margot was working at thin slicing time.
What?
Thin slicing time, experiencing a moment in its tiniest increments to where it opens up and becomes almost bottomless.
I have a question. The phrase "at play," is also used when things are negotiable, when things can change.
That's true.
And so that puts everything more in the moment for me.
Right. Exactly so. Yeah, it is true that things are negotiable in the moment. It is a recognition we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment.
Yeah.
And so we fill this moment with the choices that we're making that are revealing the possibility of the next moment. When I get into time practices with people, moving, dancing, I very often liken a moment to the experience of time as a ship, a very big ship moving through the sea of time experiences a lot action, the waves, the bow waves, the what's happening in the wake, what's happening in the as the bow moves through that sea, the next moment the sea buckles up slightly over that, so you experience what's possible in the next moment without yet being there. It's buckled for you. And when you are in a thin sliced moment, your ship is very big. That buckle of the next moment becomes present to you. You stay in the ship to experience the buckle. You don't go into the next moment. Now you've lost the buckle if you go into the next moment. You stay exactly in this moment now to know what is possible. Otherwise, you start naming things and you're not there yet. And you have no play now. The second you start naming what the next moment is going to be, now you have lost this moment. But from the stance of this moment, there's incredible play. You get to experience everything as your attention calls it. What's important here? And it will determine the orientation of your ship, right? Its size. If you're running into the grocery store to get butter, and you're in the human scale of time, your ship is very small. It's a boat. It might even be a dinghy. And you're not going to know very much about what's happening in that moment. Time opens up the finer the scale. And that you find out from playing. At least that's how I found it out, by doing a lot of playing, dancing, contact, and pop. Creative action is play. Yeah. Anything else? Any other notions? Did that help, or tickle your brain, Gretchen?
Although I must say, if I don't remember the butter going into the store, and I'm in this thin sliced area, I might forget the butter.
You might.
Yeah.
You might forget it's not that anything's bad. we live at the human scale to accomplish certain things.
Yeah.
But only living on the human scale is problematic because there's no play.
Oh, yeah. But you get to play with the butter when you get home.
That's cute. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Well, this has been a fun conversation. And it, you know, from the very practical to the very, what do I call it? It's, you know, there's a psychology in this. The psychology of play is really critical. And what it does. And I think the point I'd like to leave you guys with is the notion that every moment is a toy. And how you play, the fact that you allow yourself to play starts to allow you to show up and be present and be visible. And that visibility does two things. It allows you to be both brilliant and vulnerable. Because you are available. And who you are at play is not like anybody else, which is why you're vulnerable.